Hello everyone, welcome back to the Hardcore Grim Dawn. Now I am a Goofus. It has been pointed out to me that I need a two-handed weapon to do the spam. The spam force waves, which I totally had forgotten about. So thank you for reminding me of that. But we're gonna go ahead and give this a shot to see. Yeah, I see it. Definitely hitting hard. Alright, so this does definitely increase the damage output here. And it doesn't actually cost that much energy, simply by matter of the fact that it actually reduces the energy cost of the ability. Now you may be wondering why it still does comparable damage to the regular. This is primarily because I am wielding a two-handed weapon, which in general is just going to bust out more damage than a shield and sword combination. Observe that this is busting out 60 to almost 200 physical damage each attack, as compared to this, which is 18 to 64, plus the shield, which was a flat 58. So this is doing, on average, almost twice as much as the single-hand weapon shield combination. So really what you're losing here is the stun in exchange for rapid-fire force waves. Basically. Does it decrease the total range? It does not. Alright, so even though it does 60% less weapon damage, it still is more weapon damage going on here. Whoops. Let me just almost die. This is totally fine. It's still doing more consistent weapon damage. Now, this is incredibly powerful. But the question is, as a hardcore character, am I going to want this, let me just bite my tongue really quick, long term? That's an interesting question, but overall, normally I would say yes, and the only reason I probably won't keep it on the rapid fire is simply because I am on randomized skills here, so I can't necessarily guarantee. Actually, let me give you a specific example, because I'm about to have this problem. At some point, I'm going to be getting up to Haven. Haven's great. Haven increases the efficiency of my shield. I don't have to use a shield still, but it would be kind of silly to not use a shield if I have increased shield stats, namely in its cooldown and its block amount, right? I believe that's it. Either that or it block chance and block damage. Yes, not cooldown. Silly me. So, as incredibly effective as this is, and it definitely is very effective, you can see it's having a little bit more trouble with my boy Girthrand here. It's still, at some point I'll want to switch to shield just so I can actually utilize the increased shield stats that I'm going to have because of Haven. So this is something I'll definitely be using in the short term. And ideally, by that point, I'll have my other Blitz, that's the one. I'll have Blitz finished at that point, and the reason why that's going to be really useful with the non-spam force wave is because I can alternate the two and stun lock enemies, specifically bosses. So at that point, it doesn't often, there are, granted, several bosses and such that are immune to stuns, which is deeply unfortunate, but overall, most tough enemies, including a lot of the heroes that you will be encountering, who, frankly, in my case, are often the biggest threats, because heroes spawn with a bunch of sidekicks that are unpredictable and random and could be a pain in the neck, whereas bosses have the same sidekicks every time and it's not really that big of a deal. But anyways, back to the point. If you can stun lock your target, how much or how little damage you're doing at that point is fairly moot. It's simply a matter of time before you inevitably eliminate the target, because they're stun locked and they're not going to kill you, which is a very safe thing to do in hardcore, and I am extremely fortunate to be able to get this combination. I am extremely fortunate to have that randomly given to me, because last time I did this randomly, I believe, I'm not sure if that was recorded or not. That might have been a character that died before I could even get to, before too long. But I did not have that So this is fairly lucky for me, but eventually I will need to switch this off into the regular Forcewave because I won't be having a two-handed weapon equipped, simply because at that point, hopefully I'll be able to get that stun lock going, which would be absolutely fantastic. And then at that point, it doesn't make a difference whether or not I'm hitting harder or more often. It just matters that I have the ability to keep those stuns going pretty much indefinitely. Now, I can run this for a decent while, because we're actually fairly far away from Haven as a skill in general. So this is something I'll want to run for at least this early game portion until I get to Haven. Unless another shield boosting skill comes up in the meantime, because there's several of those. Specifically, no, we're actually past that, because we didn't get shield training or overguard. So, no, actually, we can keep this on for a decent amount of the early game here. And use this as our primary offensive force until Blitz is increased and we actually have Haven. And we can use Blitz as our emergency stun until we get to the point where we have to take off the spam Forcewave in general. Alternatively, and this is a idea that I have been thinking about, I could respeckle out of Presence of Virtue and use that for something else. Potentially, for example, Menhir's Will, which would also be incredibly effective. Basically, it's a second lease on life when you're almost dead. This is 16, this is 12. That wouldn't quite be enough, but that's okay. We could always put those points into something else. For example, maybe Decorated Soldier or something. But the potential is there, where I don't necessarily have to use Presence of Virtue. Now, at this particular point in time, there's nothing wrong with me having Presence of Virtue. It's increasing my energy regeneration at a point in time where I kind of need. You can actually see where it's really helping out. Even though I have reduced energy costs, it is primarily the fact that I have Presence of Virtue that is helping with this energy management here. So at least for now, I want Presence of Virtue because it does help me spam for longer. Now, when I get to the point where I'll have to make that decision, one of the things I will have to weigh is, can I acquire equipment? Or is there good enough equipment that increases my energy regeneration to the point where I can keep this going as long as I need to, given the increased difficulty of enemies at that time? So that's something I'm going to have to experiment with when I come to that point. But we have potential here. The commenter who I have written down as a name, but I just don't have... I'm trying not to die over here. I will put it in the description. The person who recommended this to me. But excellent suggestion. I haven't used this in a very long time, because way back in the early days, this skill... Well, okay, I can't necessarily say this skill was bad in the early days. I could have just misunderstood being a very new player at the time and just never used it again. Something I have a tendency to do, well, I had a tendency to do way back in the day. I am far more flexible and open-minded now than I used to be. Back in the old days, if I tried something and it didn't work the first time, I would generally give up on it. And nowadays, I realize that a lot of that was because I didn't know what I was doing. Not only in this game, but in other games. Smite is a great example of this, where for the first, I would say, oh gosh, year? The first year I was playing Smite, I would try something, and if it didn't work, I would stop with that. It could be down to a character or a specific item. I would just be like, nope, this was trash, I'm never going to use it again. And looking back, this is more because I didn't know what I was doing, more than the actual fault of the item or character in the first place. Some characters I'd given up on way long ago, I played a couple of years later. And same thing here, a couple of classes that I gave up on that I played a couple of, well, not years later, but months later, turned out to be really good. The Nightblade was actually one of these. I thought it was too defensively weak, and that it wouldn't ever work in practical application. And again, looking back now, I mean, nowadays, it's one of my more favorite masteries. Not individually, I'm testing out a solo Nightblade character. That's a bit rough, because there are very few defensive options. The damage types that the Nightblade has access to don't always mesh together very well or very cleanly, so it is a bit of an interesting experience trying to get all that to mesh the way I kind of need it to. But nevertheless, it is one of my favorite submasteries, I should actually be saying, to slap into a build. And way back in the day, I used to hate it because I thought it was just way too squishy, and I just didn't understand then that I'm just a moron, basically. And that's really what it comes down to, is just not knowing what I'm doing at the time. So for a very long time, I never used Forcewave. This is actually the first time in an extremely long time I've used Forcewave, to be completely honest. Not Forcewave specifically, but the spam Forcewave. I should be more specific here, because you've seen me use the regular Forcewave before. It's not like I've never used that. I'm a huge fan of the regular Forcewave, but this definitely does offer me a lot of damage here. You can see it going. Now again, this is a little bit weak. This is not an ideal two-handed weapon. It doesn't really do anything for physical damage. It's actually a lightning one. It's just the one that I had in my inventory that didn't boost pets, basically. But it does make a difference. That I nowadays know what I'm doing, and I understand the potential of this. And I also understand that even right now, I'm not using it to its maximum capacity, because my weapon's improvised. This is an improvised two-handed weapon. So, even so, this can get better. But it definitely has a lot of use here. And you can especially see with Warden Krieg here, where I can hit him with Forcewave just outside of his Shockwave range here, which is fantastic. Which I already knew you could, because the range of Forcewave, that's actually why I specifically checked to see if it reduced the range of Forcewave, because I was wondering if I could do that, because I've always known, well, I can't say always known, but I've known for a very long time, many years, that Forcewave, the regular Forcewave, was just outside of that range of Krieg's Shockwave. So I knew that if I could spam this, I was too close there, that was a mistake on my part, I thought I was farther away than I was. But I knew if I could spam Forcewave, then we're pretty much golden. And another thing, you just saw him die before I even Forcewaved. It doesn't stop the internal trauma damage, right? So that's still going on. So yeah, it's an absolutely fantastic time. And for fighting Warden Krieg, it's probably ideal, in all honesty. But yeah, I could go into this full-on. Do I want Rebuke? Do I want Haven? It wouldn't be a bad thing. If I get Resilience, I'll probably swap out Presence of Virtue for Menhir's Will. If I wind up with Resilience, it's gonna primarily, whether or not I stick with Tremor or I go into and whether or not I respeckle into Menhir's Will is going to depend on a couple of factors. Interestingly enough, I am past the shield passives of the soldier, right? So I do have that going in my favor. For Oathkeeper, it's going to depend on whether or not I get Resilience. I'm past most of the shield skills for Oathkeeper. There is a moment where I'll be wondering if I get it from Reprisal and also Shattering Smash, but that'll all be decided in one fell swoop, right then and there. So I may go ahead and switch to shields temporarily with Haven, see if I get either Aegis of Menhir or if I get Shattering Smash. If I don't, respec into Menhir's Will, using the points from Presence of Virtue, go into Tremors, and then use Blitz to both stun and, well, knock down, as a closer, and run Forcewave as my primary method of dealing damage. So it's going to depend on what my future skills look like. So we are going to have to kind of take that one a little slow. There will be a point at which I will temporarily be going back to shields. That's nice, actually. Well, I'm going to go ahead and equip that. There will be a point at which I will be going back to shields until I know whether or not I have either Shattering Smash or Aegis of Menhir. But if I don't get either of those, or if I get Resilience, that's going to turn things right around, and I'm going to want to respeckle that. Just straight up. Oh, I can finally equip this too. This is even better than that is, so we're just going to go ahead and equip that, sell that, sell that. We're going to keep the shield for now. We are going to keep the the single-hand weapon as well. I think maybe I can forge a new two-handed weapon. I'll have to check that. I'm not sure. Do you have two-handed weapons that... Well, there's that. Not ideal. We'll make... Oh, great. Delightful. Are we gonna get anything useful here? That's trash. Oh, come on. No, none of that's worth it. That was a waste. I'll be honest, that was a total waste. I can put this on. I'm not sure I want... Well, I guess it's better than what I have currently, but it's not something I'll necessarily want to keep on long term. We can sell that. We can sell that. Alright. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and cut it here. It was a good little run. Very fantastic. So yeah, thank you all very much for joining me. If you liked this, please like and subscribe. If you didn't, please ignore me. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, ideas, suggestions, and or requests, please leave them down in the comment section below. Thank you all very much for joining me, and have a great 24 hours.